Hello and welcome back to Split Decision, the same show, but on our new channel, Double Peak. Of course, anybody wondering for some of the changes that we have coming up, the main difference, Mitch is still here, as you can see, is that we're going to have Tobin on board to hopefully make us look that little bit prettier and make the quality and the quantity of our content go up quite a bit. Mitch, I want to know, what have you got planned? Now that you've got someone who can do all the dirty work for you, what are your ideas?
Honestly, I can't wait to just draw on some screens, man. That's what we're going to be doing. Some little breakdown content, some nice little flowing arrows. I might even add in some custom stencil sounds while it's going through. It's some pretty exciting stuff.
Okay. Well, either way, it's something that I definitely think you guys should subscribe to. Even though this is a brand new channel, I'm going to try and push it as much as humanly possible because we do have a lot of exciting things. Hopefully going to bring in some pro players. Hopefully going to get some content creators involved as well to make this basically a Valorant hub for EMEA going forward. But this week, we do still have the podcast, and on Split Decisions, we've decided to have a look at the EMEA challengers, the teams that we kind of expect to basically build the future of Valorant, Mitch, because that's been one of the things that it's been okay so far, especially in EMEA, but it looks like it's about to get quite a bit better.
Yeah, not quite the Ascendant League, but it's something else. It's a region for these lower level teams to sort of practice, get their level of skill up, and who knows, maybe eventually be able to feed on into that VCT main league. But, with the franchise coming up and everybody excited for that to kick off, it's good to have something to sink our teeth into and get a sense of how these other teams are getting on.
Well, either way, we're just going to go straight into some of the teams that we have basically coming up. And I want to start with sort of a couple of the leagues that, firstly, in the case of the Italian league, hasn't actually started yet. But we got a few leagues that are ongoing, a few teams that have already played. But the Italian one hasn't, and a lot of the teams are missing. We'll do a similar thing with Portugal as well, because, again, I don't think everybody's announced, and there's still a few pieces here and there that I'd like to see sort of added or even just know some of the players a bit better before we go too far into detail. But in general, Mitch, anyone you're excited about when it comes to the sort of Italian league?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, Tom, we're not seeing the full list here necessarily, but off the bat, Desire, he's drawing my eye because Feku's on there, and we know this guy. He's got a good history running throughout even before London United over in the EMEA scene. The other one, though, that caught my eye was Mako Esports. That team has Morphe on their coaching staff. And this guy, obviously, he was a phenomenal member of the Lucky Boys back in the day that you and I got to cover. To be honest, the only thing that I have to say, I'm backing off because I'm sure he's fantastic as a coach and so on. I'm sad that he's not playing. We won't get to see him on the server, man, because he was really exciting to watch.
Yeah, I still remember, I don't know if they took a map or came very, very close to taking a map off the champions winning Ascend when they were going through the open qualifiers, but like that team had some promise. So yeah, to see it's a little bit sad to sort of see them diminish. I think also if you look at GMT, there might be a couple of faces that you recognize over there, like with Bippo, Heartbeat, Naze. I think we've seen all of them play to at least a decent level, with like Angry Titans being in the sort of VRL like finals last year. So I think that that's a roster, if I'm being honest, that I kind of expect to take it when it comes to Italy. But again, you've still got two completely non-listed teams, and then you've got one that's half listed. So maybe still a little bit more to come from that one, but we'll move swiftly on. I want to get more into now Portugal, because we've got most of the teams on hand. But I'll be honest with you, Mitch, they're not a lot of faces that I recognize, but that's probably because they've only just got their own league. And last season it was like, hey, you're just like Spain, but you can play there, but it's all Spanish orgs, so you kind of won't. And it was weird.
Yeah, I think there were probably more teams than there were Portuguese players in the previous iteration. So yeah, definitely somewhere that they're going to be approaching the building blocks on. Seeing there though, Vikings 14, they've got Tuga TV. I mean, we've seen Tuga around a lot ever since the very first. I'm pretty sure he was in Spike Nations back in the day, like way back in 2020. He's been on the scene, he's been streaming, he's been playing. So a name that I'm familiar with, but in a competitive environment, this is brand new waters for me. Pretty much looking at these rosters.
Yeah, I think Saw has a couple of players. Like, I think Fizzy is someone that I've seen like a few times, talented player. And I think also GTZ as well has a couple of players who are like part of Desire, part of Team Queso. So they might be the ones that I'd sort of sit at the top, but that's purely based on these players have played in other teams before. So I think if we now move on to somewhere where we should start to see quite a few faces that we recognize, and I know that Zesh is probably watching this bit exclusively, We've got ourselves the Dach League.
Yeah, we know Zesh is going to have a lot of opinions about this one, Tom. And certainly we will as well. A ton of players we recognize there. I mean, the first one that I hovered over, assuming that it would be an empty one, was listed as TBD. And it had Simon Dark there. So I immediately diving in with names that I recognize. And then you move over to Unicorns of Love. And let me tell you, Canafish is looking fantastic. Good old Irish flag flying high over in the German scene. Fantastic to see. You know, I don't blame the German scene for looking outside of it. They definitely need to look at some higher ELO regions and snipe some talent.
Ireland.
So it's good to see. It's good to see Ireland getting the recognition on the international level.
Well, I'm going to try and be a little bit more logical and go for the likes of Maus, because Maus actually have a fairly cracked team. You've got Alorante and Obnox, who we've already seen an insane amount of sort of top tier play. I think Alorante is someone who I think for a while probably could have made it into like one of the lower teams in the top division. I think he's incredibly strong. Muri as well, someone we saw on Wave back in the day. Again, incredibly strong player. And they brought in Alluri, who's actually the ex-IGL of the guys at Focus. So... And we saw him in Manchester and the team at Manchester, and they actually looked incredibly good. So that alongside Kundi, ex-Big, another sort of coach that I think is going to be causing issues for other teams. So Maus are definitely sort of my favorites, but then you have the likes of alternate attacks as well. You got Buha and Ambi. Ambi coming over into the German league. I think someone, again, who, when we saw him, what was it, on Giants, he was pretty solid. Yeah. I'm surprised he hasn't ended up sort of a little bit further up. And I don't know, like, obviously, Mitch, I know that my CS sort of, I was there in CS a little bit longer, so I remember a lot of these. But do you remember Engine from Space Soldiers? So he was one of the Turkish players.
Engine! Yeah.
He's on Angry Titans. So that for me is a very curious one, because we saw a lot of the Space Soldiers players move over. Not maybe the ones that you would have wanted, which sounds a little bit harsh, but like Zontares is still over in CS. I'm pretty sure Calyx is as well. They're the two that were kind of the heavy hitters. But the rest have trialed themselves. I think Major went back, but Engine might be here to stay. So I'm hoping he's still got some of the sort of crazy ability he had in Counter-Strike, because that could make that team at least a little bit more exciting. And just as a final note, I think CGN, although they've had to change their roster quite a bit because of the new regulations, meaning there has to be more German players, I think they have great coaching staff and are very sort of good at building teams. Like they topped the season last year. So although they might not have the names that stick out, Mitch, I think they could be one that maybe causes an upsell too, or maybe even qualifies.
Yeah. I mean, as I mentioned, you know, seeing down on that TBD, you got Simon Dark. You know, he's a player that's been around quite a bit, but hasn't necessarily reached anything.
They got
I think
BGG massive as well. So I think he was also ex-Wave, and from what I remember,
exactly,
was pretty talented.
Yeah, and he was on that roster for a long time as well. He was around. So I think there's a ton of promise in Dach, which is something that, you know, we don't often get to say. So pretty huge. And to be honest, the main thing being that this is probably the first time that we're looking at Dach without Big Clan in it. Like it's a strange thing to see. I just automatically expect that logo to be there.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at some point they make a comeback, but I do think there were pretty high expectations for them to sort of get in towards that partnership spot, and when it didn't happen, I think there needed to be decisions made, I guess.
You know, speaking of things that are missing from the German scene, I mean, it almost gave me a little bit of a mini heart attack, I would say, thinking I'd missed something in those rosters. I went through, I double checked, and I had no Aslan listed there. That would have been a tragedy, but luckily it's not because he's in challengers. We'll touch on that.
Well, nice little segue, because we are going to move on to Turkey. And that's the thing. I think, obviously, you've mentioned Aslan already, someone who is not just German, but also Turkish. And he's now moved over. But this for me, I might not say it's the most stacked in terms of, let's say, in the second season where they're going to try and win Ascension. I think there's teams in other leagues that I would favor over one of these teams winning. But in terms of where I think this will go in terms of who's going to win this division, fuck knows. I think it's going to be really difficult to predict. So I don't know where you want to start, but I think I've got 6 out of the 10 that I definitely want to talk about here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this just looks unbelievably stacked. I mean, might as well start where we've already mentioned in S2G. I mean, having
Yeah.
immediately Pora and Russ on the team, you've got my eye on you. That is for goddamn
Yes.
sure. Follow that up with an import of Aslan coming over from the German scene. He's been around, but he's
Mm.
been a player that you and I, Tom, have been massive fans of. Really wanted to see him succeed and be more prevalent on our screens.
Yeah.
Now we get that wish granted. And I think looking at the team that he's on, this has got to be his best shot to shoot for the top. Again, though, what it falls back to, even with someone like Pora, the legendary player that he is, he could be one of the best ciphers in this entire league. But the problem is there's a lot of stacked teams in here, a lot of stacked competition for them to come up against. I mean, the Wildcats are looking pretty hot as well, Tom. Some names that we recognize there from all the way back in the day. SSK. I'm so happy to see him back on the scene, back able to
Yeah.
compete on a weekly consistent
Well,
basis. He's going to be capable of doing a lot.
the thing is, if it wasn't for the fact that Navi literally picked up FPX, I wouldn't be surprised if he was still there. I think that
Yeah.
like he was a very aggressive player, someone that statistically you're going to look at and go, oh, for a Jet, maybe not the best, but his role within a team was was priceless. Like he was so good at just making space, taking those early fights. So yeah, I'm happy to see him back. The thing is though, with the Turkish league in particular, that interests me most, it's actually the young talent because okay, you have SMB that has like Izzy and Sturb, and you know that they're talented individuals. You've mentioned SSK. You got Zisto over on Digital Athletics, and he's been brought in alongside Deep Mans, who might have one of the weirdest stances to play the game, but very talented individual. And excited to see him back on a Turkish team. But then I go to Parla and Fireflux. And I genuinely find it difficult to think that even some of these new stack teams will be able to beat them because Yetaye and Woot, when we were watching Fireflux, two, like, I think they're like 17, 18 years old, two players that I think you give them another 2 years, they're guaranteed to be on like either BBL or like moving up with Foot or going up with this team because I think they're so ridiculously talented. And then Parla, they were giving everyone a run for their money. Like in one of the earlier tournaments, didn't they play like Navi and like take a map, knocked out some of the franchise teams along the way? So they're probably favorites, which is wild to say when you have that poor Russ Aslan team.
And a really interesting thing about that is the fact that Parla have made a little bit of an upgrade, right? The fact that they played recently in a tournament and they had Fireflux in that event, they're up against these guys. They're seeing that Sociable, damn strong player, really good duelist to help. They just pick him up, they swipe him. And now they're Parla with Sociable, one of the bigger threats that you've got in the Turkish scene for duelists. So yeah, an incredibly stacked team that really tops out that the roster of Turkish squads. I think looking at these guys, it's beyond a coin flip at this point. It's more of a dice roll as to who's going to come out on top. I mean, Galacticos with someone like Glove on there, it's again a phenomenal name that's dragging your eye, and they made it through the closed qualifier as well. This wasn't an invited team, so it's someone that even though they might not have as much, reputation as someone like Parla would or someone that like Istanbul Wildcats or S2G, looking at the rosters, they have now already been tested, right? They've had their dry run and it's worked out pretty well. So they're coming into this with that to their back. So I think there's probably the most exciting region that we've got here, just based on the names.
Well, we
that
didn't
we're
even
seeing
mention
alone.
Galatasaray, which is just, it's like you got one of the
That's
biggest
the thing,
sort of
man.
football teams. So I don't think they're building a bad team. Let's put it that way. But it's going to be stacked. I think if I was going to be like betting my money anywhere, I'd probably lean towards Parla just because, as you said, they've got that upgrade, but also their team was already nasty before. But I also think that that's based purely on history. And again, I think that poor Russ Aslam roster has got a lot of huge talent. Now, we're going to move on. It gets a little bit more interesting here because I think East in particular for me, Mitch, this one I feel is the most top heavy. Like I think there might be a team or two that can like I'm looking almost like a challenge for second because realistically, I don't know if there's anyone that can beat Ascend.
Yeah, look, realistically, you look at this as your group, you know that there's a top dog established. Now, it's not like we haven't seen these sort of teams fall apart or have their struggles before, but the roster that Ascend is fielding, I think I can stand behind every single one of those players individually.
Yes.
From what I've
Yeah.
heard, from what I've seen, definitely. MBS as a coach, we already know how strong he can be. And Batty G, look, that is for me the trophy handed to them already. Batty G is one of my favorite players in the world. Regionally, he has
Hmm.
got to be top
Why
five.
didn't you sign him then?
Listen, Tom, if it was just my choice, that'd be a different thing. But there's a lot more decision making behind there. I'll say when Batty G trialed for Alliance, I was blown away by every
Hmm.
aspect of this player, the amount of preparation this kid, right? And he was so young as well. He comes in with so much preparation, so much maturity. Every single mistake that was made, some people get down, especially when you're trialing, right? It's a very hostile environment to go into potentially. You can get in your own head, 4 players, and they're just looking at every mistake you make to decide if they're going with you or the other people who maybe make less mistakes. It's stressful. And every single time it was just problem solving. Everything was positive. The vibes were fantastic. I love that kid. I think that Ascend's roster, I don't think it's disrespectful to any other team in this tournament to say that they should be taking first place. And if you can take a map off them, you can go home with a smile on your face.
Yeah, I think the thing as well, someone that I'm honestly surprised is not in partnership is Monster. Like, you're talking about an 18-year-old kid who I genuinely think has the ability to outfrag anyone in the server while playing Sentinel. Like, I think even in his first game, he like top fragged by a country mile while playing Killjoy. So it's just like, and these are aggressive plays as well. So he's someone that if you talk even about like artists when he was playing before, like had a huge amount of admiration for him. I genuinely don't see more than 2 years of him not being in VCT. I just don't see it happening. I think either Ascend qualify or he gets picked up. I just think he's too much of a valuable asset to have for any team at the moment. So I think he could steamroll most of these teams. Now, to not just basically fanboy on one team, I know that we're both big fans of Benji, so you've got him playing an Enterprise. I'm interested to see how he does. Do I think they'll win? Probably not, but I hope that he does well. The one that intrigues me though more so is Anonymo, because we've always had that sort of that Polish roster being able to do quite a bit of damage, like Sneak, Styx, Grabinho have been talented and in the scene for quite a while. So maybe they're the ones that I go, okay, let's see how they do versus Ascend. Maybe they can sort of challenge them a little bit. But other than that, I think I remember Sean P from Nom. And then there's a lot of people I'm sort of intrigued to see because this is one of those regions that has a lot of talent from a lot of different regions.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that's going to benefit the most, I think, in this situation from having this challengers setup, because you've got so many teams coming in and so many players that are unknown, but also some incredibly stacked and proven rosters. I mean, like your B8 with Arch and Dreamas, you can only imagine that the rest of the team is going to be, although I'm not personally familiar with them, they've got to be solid players if Arch and Dreamas are going to co-sign on them. So it is a fantastic learning opportunity. And I think that for some regions, there is going to be a top-heavy environment, but it's something that's existed, at least looking at like even the UK scene in CS for a long time. In Ireland, certainly, we always had this like one team, they're the best, they win everything, and everybody else sort of looks up to them. They learn from them, and they drag the scene up essentially by their bootstraps. I sort of see that as what Challengers East is going to be.
Yeah, well, moving on to France. I'll be honest, with France in general, there was a couple of teams where I'm like, okay, like you've got a couple of decent players, but I think there's a lot to be learnt here because I do think some of these teams in terms of just name brand are actually a little bit underwhelming. Like, especially when you consider that I think early doors in Valorant, there was quite a lot of French teams that were doing damage and were quite exciting to watch. I think right now, I'm sort of sat there going like, okay, Mandatory, okay, Wild, okay, SNG, you've got some players that I recognize and I remember from the VCT. Other than that, okay, you got Roden on Job Life, but there's not a huge amount of people that just like pop out to me, at least, Mitch.
Yeah. Look, for the most part, I think in these French teams, again, got to shout out immediately. Alex is playing here as well. We've seen Alex before. I got to see Alex at Gamerfest, LAN over here in Ireland. So good to see another Irish flag.
Are you claiming him as Irish as well?
Well, he is Irish. He is Irish.
Is he actually Irish this time, or is it like when Enzo's Irish?
You hover over Sector 1, you look at that flag. I see a tricolor right there.
Oh,
Ireland,
God.
motherfucker. And I'll say Enzo,
It also says UK if you go on his profile, but
well,
we'll
it might be an instigation for a fight there. We'll see, Wikipedia admins. What I will say is that, and, in the run-up so far, the Irish teams, the Irish players, they've been getting good representation. I think this is the
There's
best
no Irish team
we've ever seen. Well, it depends. I think Enzo, he sort of makes every team he's on Irish in a way. His first ever LAN win,
man.
he was christened in this country, Tom. And I don't know about you, but in Ireland, we welcome people. I mean, his LAN baptism, you know what I mean? It was here in this country. It was the LAN event that brought him all that joy that maybe lit the spark of esports within him and pushed him. I'm not going to say that is what happened, but it very well could be.
So you think he flew to Ireland to play a LAN and that lit the spark? Not anything that happened before that.
Winning that LAN, his first LAN victory. I'm not sure.
So it was a Frenchman winning the Irish LAN.
Good chance. Well, we don't need. Listen, let's talk about the French league a little bit more. Mandatory. That team looks fantastic. Another team.
Did you see that intro video?
I didn't actually know.
It was sick. Like, I don't know who did the editing for that, but it was really, really good. So, well, Mitch, if you haven't seen it, let's just take a look. I feel like that's the easiest way to take a look at this cool little intro by Mandatory. It's like the main thing with this is just the editing is amazing.
Okay. I have to lower it down. That was crazy loud. What did I say? Battle chill?
I don't know.
It was battle chill mix. Okay. All right. Mandatory. Oh.
Yeah, it's really sick.
That's men of their coach a second ago, right? Was that hype? Hip.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Hip, hip, hip.
I'm not certain, but I think they might have even made the music as well.
Oh, really? I was about to say the music is banging. Some good French weather as well. Cold, dark, wet. I feel at home. Hey, Kada. Salut, salut.
Yeah, so it's like they've even got lyrics related to Valorant, so I'm pretty sure they did make the music.
Spike, yeah, God bless.
Spike Ace, God bless.
Spike Ace, oh, okay. That's awesome, man. MDR.
Yeah, but whoever is the editor of that needs like... Oh yeah, I think they even put the music at the end there.
Wow.
But yeah.
That was... Oh, wow, here we go! Yeah, filming outside in France. That's what you get. Look at this. Even the camera has a raincoat. Just about shows. Wow, that was really cool. Okay, yeah. So yeah, as far as whose frag movies are going to be the hypest, I know who that is, especially with a player like Kata on the server as well. The hippest way. But yeah, no, obviously I worked with Kata a lot. This guy, as far as young talent goes, he's got to be like the most promising out there. Phenomenal duelist, brings a lot to the team. And looking at Hip as well, it's a name I haven't seen in so long on the competitive scene because he was around so much at the start.
Did you notice
back in
the
beta
coaching staff as well?
MENA and Korea. Yeah. So Korea, another our Omen main, being around a long time, was NIP used to play with back in the day.
Yep.
And I remember. Oh man, the times that we had. It's a different time, isn't it? You think about the top of EMEA now, and even just that mandatory team: Hip, Akuma, Kada, Korea. Those are 4 players that were like pillars of the competitive scene going back to 2020, 2021, Valorant and EMEA. So, definitely a team that already grabs your attention, and then the hype video definitely definitely does the job.
But that's the thing as well. I think SBG is another one where I think like Takas, Natank, Logan is like a decent core. I think
Yeah.
especially Natank and Takas, they're two players that I think are still very much at like the top level. I think Natank might have been a little bit harshly sort of removed, considering I think although he didn't have the greatest numbers in the world, I think his like KO play and stuff was actually fantastic. And I think as well, if you look towards Wild, you've got Hype and obviously Foxy, who are a decent IGL coming over from some of the teams from Polaris. So I think there's some talent there. It's just that there's a lot of players that I don't necessarily like recognize. So I'm going to be curious to see who sort of comes out on top. They've still got the likes of Onibi as well, and like B Genius, Machina. Like these are all names that I recognize. It's just okay, who have they got with them, and how talented are these guys going to be?
Yeah, I think again, looking at some of the teams that you have here, but SBG in particular, you have essentially BDS, Natank coming in there as well from
Yeah.
Vitality, Bayaz, who used to play for what Megastitutes for a long time. This is a very stacked roster, even down the sort of, I guess, bottom and how it's
Yeah.
structured on the Wikipedia at least. And going through almost every team, I think there's recognizable aspects to it. Job Life having Roden, absolutely a standout player, but then again going to the coaching staff of Unco, these are the core French scene players. I think there's a couple teams like Valiant and Zoran,
Yeah.
so I think will sort of just make up
Sasuke
that
and
bottom
Jesse as
end.
well, though. Like that's the thing, though.
Actually, yeah,
Sasuke
yeah,
was
yeah.
on Koi and Jesse was on Giant. So like, that's what I mean.
Still
There's like a
promise.
few players in there that's like, okay, I know that you are up to that standard, but who have you got with you? It's
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
similar to
yeah.
why I think of like Carmine Core as well, which is another thing
Fair.
altogether. But it's like I haven't seen. I guess the way I'd say it is mandatory and SBG are sort of like the teams where I'm like, okay, I know these players, I can trust how they're going to play, and the rest I'm sort of looking at going, okay, who have you found? And that's going to be the exciting thing to come towards the end of the season. I think Spain actually kind of links into that quite nicely as well because Spain again has a lot of players spread out through lots of different rosters. Like there isn't one where I'm like, oh my god, that's utterly stacked. But then you start with teams like Case, and you've
Hmm.
got Minibu and Killers, Roxy all on the same team, and I'm like, well, you know, Mitch, that's a pretty solid roster.
Yeah, essentially. But Kase having Killaz on the roster as well, going to boost them down. They're keeping
Mm.
Roxy over from the past, and
Yeah,
I think
champions winner.
Yuri, right? At the end of the day, the Kase roster, it looks fantastic, but like you said, they're not alone when it comes to names that you recognize and across the board. I think Ramboot Club, they've got Bromas, they've got Loudly, Cello coming in, the Portuguese player as a
Mm.
coach. Again, stacking up as a pretty decent prospect for maybe taking that top spot. I don't know who's really like if there's a dominant number one, especially looking at
Yeah.
teams like Queso coming in, Hyber, Lowell. I mean, these two players alone have had a ton of hype behind their name in the
It's
past.
those
Hmm.
two are interesting though, because it's like Hyber for me is someone who I know will still be solid. Lau, I have no
Yeah.
idea because I just haven't seen
It's
him
been so
play.
long.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it just seems like it's almost random, and I find that with a lot of people. Like on Rebels, you've got Gatch as well, who we saw ages ago. Vukashu was always pretty good. I think Zeta having Maniac and Bold, like that's a weird one. I'll be
All
honest.
right.
Like that was not what I was expecting.
Let me hit you with something here. So I'm looking at this on Liquipedia. Actually, I think I've looked at the achievements. That's why I was gonna say there's no way it's been that long since Lau played because there's like it was like 2021 one match and then just went all the way back. But even still, looking down through the matches that he's played, right? 2023, he's obviously been kicking it off with the challengers that's on. Before that, though, you go back to November, couple games like the month before, and then you go to the 6th. I mean, it's crazy. He's got like 30 games a year. That's
Yeah,
wild. So really low official rates in there. Seeing him come through though with someone again, obviously sticking around with Poppy Fresh, he's going to have a lot of pull within the Spanish scene. They've picked up Hyber. I mean, Hyber's looking for a home. They have a decent team assembled. It's not necessarily a stamp of approval. Just looking at that roster, it doesn't tell me like, oh, Lal's going to be amazing for sure. But I still find it hard to believe that many people get on the team, get behind him if he's not still maintaining that level, still not maintaining a high level. The
yeah.
question is it going to be the level that we had back at First Strike? Because that was sensational. That was like he was challenging for names like Nuki were floating around, and we were expecting them to be the ones that were taking the cake. And every single game it was Lau. I don't know if that's going to be the case anymore.
Best Sage in the world.
Yeah, he really was.
And maybe the worst
Sage.
Phoenix, but let's ignore that.
We don't need to talk about that.
Well, to finish, we have, well, I'm biased, but what I would consider the big run going into Polaris.
Yeah.
I think this is another, it's interesting because this one, I think there's one very obvious one similar to Ascend where I'm like, that roster has to qualify. But in this league, I do actually think there's one or two teams that might be able to upset them. So we'll address the elephant in the room, because before I even get to finish the sentence and say Apex, Mitch, who on that team are you excited for?
Alexienzo, of course, my boy. He's back here with a fantastic team. Mystic beside him as well. You got Magnum making a comeback. Shadow. Oh God, I can't get more excited.
Shadow
Kaiko,
back.
Kaiko could be good. Nothing against you, Kaiko. You know, I'm looking forward to your performance. But the other four, they've got my eye.
This is the thing, though. How much do you trust Mystic's word? That's why I wanna ask you.
I'm about 100%. I see a cliff.
Okay.
He says jump.
So,
I'm jumping. I'm not even asking.
Mystic said to me that he gets like Durka vibes from Kaiko.
I'm
like,
in.
He's like, this kid is it. So I think we saw him in Bonk previously, and like there were games where they'd play like a best of 5 and the man would have like 87 kills. So it's like the only thing that worries me with Apex, I think that they've got a lot of players who, if they are still at the level they can be, they win this easily. Like I don't think there's anybody that compete with them except maybe Focus, and Focus is another thing altogether. But like, I need to see the best out of Magnum and Mystic because they're some of the more experienced players. Shadow's never really going to be putting up the craziest numbers, but as a support player is exceptional. Solid. Enzo as well, it's like he put up decent numbers, and in this setting, I think he'll be more than good enough. But I still need that X factor, and that's where Kaiko has to come in. So that's my only worry. But from talking to the players themselves, they seem very confident in his ability, and the fact that like it almost seemed like he was a shoo-in when they were sort of building this roster. That to me means he has to be a talent, because otherwise there's a lot of sort of duelists on offer, especially for an organization as big as Apex. Like for people who don't know from CS, they like bought players like Jacob out of 100 Thieves contracts. Like they have that sort of finance to build a sort of Goliath of the leagues that are looking to get into the sort of partnership. But if they believe that he's good, and with the coaching staff they have, I think he's going to be a monster. But Mitch, I want to talk about Focus, because I'll be honest, again, this team looks like it has a skill ceiling that could actually be very high.
Yeah. Well, firstly, that's something we can say for a lot of these teams, but Focus in particular, I mean, look, they've picked up Purple. They got your boy Lewis, Yugi, all very experienced players that have been around the scene for quite a while. I think your boy Lewis, especially, you know, he's been on Focus. I think it's fair to say. You know, we've seen him float around, and you know, even just thinking back to that performance they had at Red Bull home ground, they were in a solid position. They damn well could have proceeded on the tournament.
Yeah.
You know,
and that was without Purple as well.
And that was without Purpo. Exactly. Now you add that to it, they're already competing with some top teams on the global scene. So, yeah, naturally, they come in with a lot of eyes on them. Rolling back the years a little bit with the team beside them, a HS Deer as well. I mean, it literally is. Some of these players were on it, like Vicious, Lynxy, Ally, and they left, played on different teams throughout, and now HS Deer has been resurrected. I was wondering about Lear as well, because it's like, I don't think he was on HS Deer, but I recognize him. He used to play for Malik, a team that was a bit of a headache for a couple of the sort of tier 2, tier 3 teams. Was at the Insomnia event as well and came first in that. So, like, you know, has some decent LAN experience and everything like that as well. As far as HS Deer go, they're looking fantastic, and I haven't even gotten near the Iris bias yet.
Oh yeah, I'm not going in that direction. One thing I want to touch on with Focus, my only worry with them is the fact that they did get rid of their IGL. So I want to see how that's going to work, because obviously Manchester, we had that sort of thing of Illuri being back, and I think potentially that could have actually boosted them with his calling. But I want to go the other way and go to Les Petits Bouffons, because I think Vong, Link, Luzza, Russ, and Cray as like a 5-stack. Obviously, it's still more of a mix, but now they should be looking for an organization that they qualified. That team looks nasty. But I believe they did actually lose to Vamanos, who had like the Zeke Nile sort of Tundra Alliance, like a couple other players, or Nile played for them. So it's like, I'm actually really intrigued by that team because I would have thought going into that match that Le Petit Buffon should win that one whole-handedly, really. I think they got a really stacked roster, but seemingly that sort of Danish core might actually have a bit more to them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing as well. When you look at some of these rosters on paper, it's a completely different thing when it comes to playing on the server. The thing that a lot of these players that I'm about to mention have got under their belt, Bonk. These guys, obviously, everybody knows Bonkar, I think. Pretty familiar with them at this point. Cider, super sub. We've seen him all over the place. Former Alliance as well. We'd love to see it. Got Kicks, Jusu, and Chihuahua. Again, Jusu wrapping that Irish flag, had some good stints, but I still don't think Jusu's gotten even close.
Chihuahua's a beast.
Yeah. So have I. I heard he got a really cool 4K on the back of the Sensei side, but I don't think anybody saw it. That roster's experience, they've got it all under their belt. They've played within the VCT. Jusu, I don't think has gotten a fair shot at the top level. This under leadership like Bonkar, especially someone who's been around the block a couple of times. This is definitely something that will allow him to flourish.
He's also got, like, that's the thing with Kako leaving. Although I think that's a huge loss, it's also a chance for Jusu to sort of fill those shoes. Like, give him a chance to actually be that more aggressive player, take more of the space away, because ultimately he was still that sort of flex duelist. So maybe that will give him a little bit of extra space and give him the chance to sort of work a little bit more. I'm surprised you haven't gone the route of like human tripwires yet, because that's
they were next up.
You've got another Irishman on there. So and I think as well, someone like Stanley, I think I kind of, again, expected to see a little bit more of him, but after 10 star, he kind of fell off my radar at least a little bit, going to Movistar Riders. But I think he was a solid like IGL type, so I think that'll be a good lead. But go on, you've got your second Irish player in this league, so plug away.
That's right. A lot of tricolors flying today, boys. It's a good day to be Irish. Human Tripwires. They've got Connor McNuggets. You might recognize him as. He was playing under that name for a while. I asked him why in God's name he would do that, and he didn't really know. So, I think he's gone back to Connor. I hope he has. We'll see.
Sounds like something you would do. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I'm surprised your name isn't like McDonald's wrap or something.
Honestly, the reason it pissed me off is I found myself being very hungry during some of the casts, and I have to keep saying McNuggets.
I'm going to rename myself to Subway Sandwich. Just
don't you dare. What's up? Me and Italian BMT here are going to go grab something to eat. But yeah, I think Human Tripwires as well, they've been around a long time. They've been putting in the work. Connor, at least, has been on that roster for quite a while now, really trying to make it work, and seeing him in here, I think it's a huge opportunity. I would question again how much time is really going into this for them. I don't know what their situation is. They're obviously in here as a non-sponsored team. I don't think Human Tripwires is an org. So then again, it comes down to, a lot of these people, they've got something to do. You might have a job to maintain or something like that. I think that could obviously weigh down on them, but if there's none of those issues, if this is full dedication out of the guys, I don't think there's any reason that they can't be a competitor that looks for at least a podium finish in here.
So obviously, normally right now we'd do split decision, but I think we have waffled on a little bit too much at this point. So instead, I'd like us to just take a couple of the regions and do our predictions for who we think is going to win it. And I'm not going to make this easy for you, Mitch. I'm not going for East. I'm not letting you pick Ascend, and then I have to try and come up with a reason why I think Benji is about to win the entire division.
You don't think he is?
No. I'm going to go for Turkey, because I think Turkey is utterly stacked, and I think that there's so many different teams you can argue for, so take it away.
I mean, it's a tough one, but looking at the teams that we've got here, I think, Fireflux, Parla, even Istanbul Wildcats, they've got some serious rep to them, but S2G is who I'm going to throw my hat in with. And I think looking at this roster, someone like Russ in here as a top Turkish player, one of the best duelists that we've got in the world, and a very exciting prospect. Pora, Sentinel, that used to get us excited back in the day almost as much as Nats did when he was pulling out that Cypher. And then you throw in our boy Aslan, one of the best players we've got in the world, one of the most, I think, from a mentality perspective, you almost cannot get better than Aslan. And I think he's going to fit really well in this team. I wanted to see him do it on Big Clan, but this could be S2G pushing all the way to that grand final, really making a name for themselves.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite people I think I've met throughout the sort of Valorant scene. Very, very friendly guy, fun to talk to about Valorant. I also do pray that Russ is back on the duelist because that's what we
Yeah.
sort of remember him for. He has been sort of shifting in towards like initiator roles and sort of pushed around a bit in other teams, like in Giants. You had like Fatinho, so a lot of the time Fatinho would take the duelist role away from him. So I hope that's what we get back. I know that that's something he enjoyed. Now I'm going to go a different route. I'm going to go for the tried and true, the tested team, the one that's got that upgrade of sociable, and I think it has to be Parla. I was torn between sort of them, Fireflux, and of course S2G,
Okay.
but I think that like Fireflux sort of they've got the young players. I think in the next couple of years we're going to see players like Woot and Yetier sort of like move themselves over, but realistically, I think that Laura's sociable, like JJ as well, they're going to be players where I think that realistically it's going to be difficult for them to lose this unless someone really comes together strong. So, like, obviously, in the first season, I think a lot of teams are going to be testing stuff because it doesn't move towards Ascension. So maybe that gives SGG a chance to really build into things. But with how established this roster is, I think right now they're going to be impossible to beat.
Yeah, I think that's fair, Tom. Well, let me throw in my little curveball then as to which region I'm going to go for. Polaris. We're
Okay.
pulling out Polaris, Tom. And I think Polaris is a pretty solid one to go for because there's a little bit of debate over who's going to be taking it. But I know who my fan favorite's going to be. I'm hoping you're not picking them.
I feel like I will be because I feel
Yeah,
like the
probably.
obvious choice is Apex. Like
Probably,
I
yeah.
think they're the team that has the most experience by a country mile. Like it's not even close. Like Magnum playing international events, Mystic, Enzo as well. Shadow's been someone who was on FPX under Angel, and the only real unproven, untested is Kaiko, who well he was literally on one of the other teams, Bonk, and was their best player. So I think that the fact that you've got these players confident in that youngster, you've got a really solid organization in terms of having everything behind them, like the mental coaches, like all the different sort of like even going back to like strategical analysts and like different things. So I think that there's too much there to fail. And that's probably the only thing that could get them. I think it's if those players don't perform to the level we already know they can do. Other than that, maybe a focus could squeeze in there, but I don't know if anybody else, unless again they hit like a ridiculous peak, will be able to compete with Apex.
Yeah. Well, look, if we're realistic, Tom, I think Apex might be the favorites here. I think you might have given a compelling argument. I'd love to
Okay.
come in and say, well, you know what? I think Bonk have just as much of a chance. I do think that the players there could compete in a BO3 series, a BO5, sure, especially at the end of a season. But I don't know. I find it hard to fully argue it that Bonk are going to be at the top, but I'm going to do it anyways because I don't think we should pick the same team, Tom. I think that sort of
Yeah,
defeats
it's a
the
bit
purpose. We're
dull.
filling in for split decision and so on, right? And I'm thinking about Cider. I'm thinking about this guy, how he jumped onto an international scene to a
Mm.
Masters event as a sub for FPX, slotted in like it was the plan all along. He looked amazing. So, as far as he's able to pivot and provide support, I think he's going to be one of the best players out there in the European region. And add on Bonkart to that. Hell, if anybody can teach you how to improve, I think it's this man. He's one of the
Over
strongest.
Enzo
Well, you know, he's one
as
of
an
the
IGL, like just a comparison between like
Well, listen.
Bonkar or
It's
Enzo. Like who would you go
it's a
for?
different thing. Do you want a physiotherapist or a chiropractor? You know, a little bit of balance is good, Tom. A little bit of everything. So, I think
You're not
Bonkar in
siding
his
with
lane,
Enzo.
I think I would be. But Bonkar, in his lane, he's one of the best at what he does specifically, which is different to what Enzo does, Tom. I don't
Okay.
want to waste time explaining that to you, though. I don't know
Oh
you get
yeah.
it, but
Mm.
yeah, it's a strong team, and I think at the end of the day, picking Bonk and picking Apex, what it's telling me about Polaris, about EMEA really, is that either way, the winning team will have an Irish player on it, and that. I mean, that's amazing. That's just a beautiful world that we live in, Tom. It looks like we're taking over, and
Um.
I love to see it.
Okay. I'm just gonna try and ignore the fact that you're again calling Enzo Irish when he is definitely French.
I was
But
baptized here, but it is what it is.
we have bigger fish to fry because not only is this the end of our first episode when it comes to split decision being over on Double Peak, but we have our announcement to make, which is going to be that alongside the channel being launched, just as like a thank you for anybody coming over to the new thing and supporting us as we look to try and build this into something bigger for EMEA in terms of content, in terms of us being involved, in terms of better quality, quantity. So we wanted to give something back, and that is going to be the new Araxis. How do you say it? Araxis? One of those.
Araxis?
Araxis. That'll be the one. We're going to be giving that away. 8,700 VP or £75. We're probably going to give that over PayPal. All you have to do is check in the description. That will likely take you to the tweet and then enter on Gleam. So just make sure that you do that if you want to be entered into the giveaway. If you're not and you just hear it because you love the content, that's brilliant all the same. And hopefully we'll be back over the next week or so bringing you even more content, be it some more split decision, be it some more analytical videos, or even some fun stuff along with the players. So please make sure you like and subscribe, and we will see you then.